This program is proudly brought to you by Telecom Limited and Daytech.
Good night, Papua New Guinea. I'm Malcolm Wyra, and welcome to this special one-hour episode of Infocus. In this one-hour session, we discuss the creation of safer communities in PNG. Joining us for discussions, we have Mr. Tony Cameron, UN Resident Coordinator Office Representative, Dr. Olugbenga Ige, Senior Research Fellow and Program Leader at the National Research Institute's National Security and International Relations Program, and Mr. Akem Tom, Research Officer at the National Research Institute, National Security and International Relations Research Program. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Firstly, what would you attribute the decline in the law and order situation in Papua New Guinea to?
Law and order, you can see at the moment now, is law and order is increasing in our country. Like we experience in our country, like kidnap of anthropology from Australia Beach, and 3 women in Ella, in Bonman Bosave, where we experience, and we also experience kidnapping of 17 students who are primary students there in Mount Bosave, where there's a law and order problem that we experience. Then we also experienced recently 64 people killed in Wabandamanda. So the security situation in our country is not declining. It is increasing every now and then. So like in Port Moresby, we also experience law and order. Killing is everywhere. So government at the moment does not have any proactive strategy in place. What they used to do is they have the reactive strategy. When there is a killing, when the situation already happened, they go in and try to bring in police defense and try to stop the problem. But they don't have proactive measures like civil defense corps, like what they can establish in order to protect lives and community. Those are some of the things that government really need to do. They have to put some proactive measures in to control law and order in our community. At the moment, the community is not safe in PNG for women and girls to move around freely. Movement of people from one place to another is not safe. So at the moment, we don't have a safe community.
Now, Tony, could you give us an insight into the programs and initiatives the UN is implementing in the law and order space in Papua New Guinea, and how are you tailoring it to the suit PNG context?
Thanks, Malcolm. That's a great question. As Tom was mentioning, we recognise the fact that the police, the RPNGC, are really under-resourced, and they're really only clustered around the population centres around PNG. So most people in PNG who live in the rural areas don't really get to see or get protection from the formal justice system. So in lieu of that, the UN has set up a number of initiatives and projects like Women Make the Change project that just finished in 2023. We have the Spotlight project, which was funded by European Union. Mental health and psychosocial support in Hela province. Again, that's just finishing at the moment. And then creating conditions for peace, that's centred in the Southern Highlands and Hela provinces of PNG. That is really based on what the World Bank called a pathway to peace model, where we engage not only the private sector, but also the NGOs and faith-based organisations to help establish a peaceful situation, perhaps to negotiate a ceasefire during a tribal fight. And once that has been established, usually through the Council of Churches, then the UN moves in and then creates conditions for peace by providing some development assistance to consolidate that peace. So these are just some examples of some of the work that the UN's been doing, especially in hotspot areas like the Highlands and also in Bougainville in the Sustaining Peace for Bougainville project.
Now, Dr. Ige, what specific forms of research is the National Research Institute initiating in the law and order sector in Papua New Guinea?
Now, like my colleague Akem and Malcolm from UN, of course, they've offered their perspectives. At the moment, at the National Research Institute, last year we completed a research, regarding the involvement of non-state actors. Participation in building safer communities in PNG. And when we talk about these non-state actors, of course, they are captured in the national security policy of the PNG nation. We have the religious leaders, the non-governmental organizations, the private security companies, and a whole lot of them. Of course, in that section, you will not see the mosque, which represents the Muslim group in PNG. Maybe at the time, that document was put together. Of course, they don't really have representation, in the appropriate structures of security in this nation. And lastly, we had the community, to that section. So these are basically non-state actors. But at the commencement of the project, we discovered that, there is a primary feature of the non-state actors in PNG as to what occurs in other nations. And how do I mean? In Papua New Guinea, some of the non-state actors, they are funded by the government. But in other nations of the world, non-state actors do not receive any funding from the government. So that happens to be the key feature. So it was in this period that we visited Mount Hagen, visited Ley, and also visited Jiwaka province. So at Jiwaka province, I actually encountered some situations that warranted me to ask questions. For instance, how do you maintain law and order in places where we do not have the presence of police in PNG? For instance, we were at Kindeng Market, and I was actually told during the time we were collecting data from the market men and women that there was no single police station in that area. So when you have such a situation, how do you maintain law and order? So that happens to be one of the projects we have completed. And another project that commenced in 2022 and ended at about mid-2023 was, evaluating the effectiveness of service delivery in PNG. And in that project, we had to, collect data from employees in the law and justice sector, brought them to NRI campus, made them generate data as to what constituted the problems, regarding law and order in PNG. So it was from the outcome of the focus group discussions they had at NRI that we put together a questionnaire, and that questionnaire we had to, administer it in Port Moresby to different employees in the law and justice sector. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to collect data from the PNGDF because they are no longer part of the law and justice sector. They are now part of, they've moved out, and their area is, the defense structure. So these are the two projects we have completed. And in 2024, we will, soon be visiting other areas in PNG regarding service delivery in terms of law and justice. So in a nutshell, these are basically the projects we have completed and one that we are about to commence in 2024. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Tom, what role do you see for research institutions and academia can play in promoting safer communities in Papua New Guinea, and how can it be further expanded?
Okay, thank you. Research is one of the things we can do to find out the root cause of the law and order problem that we have in our country, like trouble fight in the highlands. Okay, we really need to see who is financing those buying of firearms. The people in the village, like village people, cannot afford to buy 10 to 20,000 gun worth. So there is some people is financing them. So as a research institute, we really want to conduct research to find out who is financing those people in the community, because the law and order problem in the country is caused by firearms. People don't have firearms, they will not cause a lot of problem destruction like what we have at the moment. So firearms is the main root cause of problem in our country. So as a research institution, in the future, we want to conduct a research on who is financing those firearms. It may be politicians, it may be the educated people supporting them. We don't know, but we really need to find out through research. That's one. The movement of firearms from one place to another. So through research, we can find out. The firearm is they transport from Indonesia or Australia, or which places that they move firearms from there to islands to continue trouble fight. We really need to find out. So through research, we can find those problems. We cannot estimate and say that these politicians are involved, or educated people are involved, or these people are involved. Through research, we can find out the actual people who are involved.
Does the United Nations also undertake any research activities in that regard?
Absolutely. In fact, Dr. Olugbenga and I attended a workshop last week specifically on small arms and light weapons reduction in PNG. The workshop was the first step in assessing the scope and the depth of the cause of armed violence in PNG. The next step is to really conduct some operational research, building on the 2005 arms survey conducted by General Jerry Singarock. And General Singarock will assist us in a new small arms survey, which will be rolled out this year. And we'll really get some hard data on, as Tom was saying, where these weapons are sourced, where the ammunition is coming from, and also what's actually driving young people, especially young men, to want to own a firearm. It's one thing having access to firearms, but why do people, especially young men, feel that they need to own firearms? So we're doing some operational research in what we call toxic masculinities, and replacing some of these traditional markers of manhood with owning a weapon. And we want to try and look at how we can turn that around. So that's just one example of some of the research that we'll be doing this year. And helping both.
Welcome back. You're watching In Focus. In this session, we discuss the role of local knowledge as well as the innovative interventions by United Nations to promote safer communities.
Local leaders play a lot of role in our community, because police and defense and all those people they are in the urban areas. They are not in the rural place. The councillors, magistrate, peace and good order committees, those people are playing an important role in the community. Where there is a problem, these people are involved to solve the problem, to make sure that this community is safe and secured for people to live. So local knowledge is very important, because if you want to solve a problem like we have in Wabanda, police don't know what the problem is, the root cause of the problem. So you have to get the local knowledge from the leaders in the community level to find out who is involved, who is causing those problems, who is supporting them. Those are the things that you are going to get from the local people. Police and defense, they don't know who is involved, who is starting the problem. So local knowledge is very important, because these people are playing an important role to make sure that the community is safe for everyone to live.
Based on the UN's programs that you run, what innovative interventions and initiatives are being proposed by the UN to promote safer communities in Papua New Guinea?
Sure. Well, building on those previous projects that I mentioned, we're looking to expand on our Highlands Joint program. This will be probably still in Hela and Southern Highlands, but perhaps even expanding out to Enga, and further along the Highlands Highway, depending on the scope of the coverage that we are able to address. We're also launching a new program called Women, Peace and Security, which will obviously focus on the gender aspects of violence and women actually not being victims as such, but active participants in building peace. And we've got some excellent examples from Bougainville where women have been active in negotiating the original Bougainville Peace Agreement, and also throughout the post-peace agreement era, using those techniques and women's sort of skills to be able to transfer those perhaps to other parts of PNG, so women can learn from each other to begin to take responsibility and build peace themselves. We're also continuing our Sustaining Peace in Bougainville project, which is really about strategic diplomacy and helping Bougainville and the national government negotiate a peaceful settlement to the Bougainville's desire to become independent. And as I mentioned earlier, there's the Saving Lives entity, or the Salient Small Arms Project, which will be rolled out this year. So these are some of the more innovative, newer projects that we'll be designing and implementing as we go forward.
Would you like to add on that?
Yes. Thank you, Malcolm, for the innovative strategies that UN has actually developed regarding the law and justice situation in PNG. Now, after our visit to Jiwaka province, when we were conducting the non-state actors' participation in building safer communities in PNG, so I then had to go and look into the security organization or architecture of different countries that are safe in the world. I looked into that of Singapore, checked, of course, Nigeria in Africa, they still have some challenges, but, look into what they have done right. I also looked into that of United Arab Emirates and that of Malaysia. But, something struck me when I look into how United Arab Emirates organized our security architecture. The security organization, in the different segments of the society in United Arab Emirates, align with what we have in PNG. And the two missing links that I discovered in the security architecture of United Arab Emirates, are actually one, the Civil Defense Organization, and second, the National Emergency Response Center. Those two things are what we do not currently have in PNG, but that have actually helped United Arab Emirates to be a safe place for people to live. And you can see it in the number of tourists that are traveling to United Arab Emirates, each year. So, and that brings us to the PNG nation. The challenges we are having in PNG is not out of place. It has happened in different nations of the world at different times. But how we now respond to it is what makes us, a strong and virile nation. And how do I mean? Now, the current situation in the country regarding law and justice, has overwhelmed our enforcement apparatus. So once we have that, the best thing to do is to see how do we reorganize our security setup, to combat the current challenges. And it was on that I proposed that the PNG nation should, establish the Civil Defense and Security Corps. So basically what they do is that they complement what the PNGDF and what the police, the immigration, the customs are doing at present. So if we reorganize our security architecture in PNG, we will have been able to reduce the current challenges regarding, law and order to the barest minimum. And again, there was a country of the world that I resided, I think in 2017, late 2017 or early 2018, they discovered that, the activities in the Baltic Sea, was becoming more intense regarding militarization. And they wrote to all households in the country that we discovered the situation in, our sea borders, and we have concerns that a particular nation could attack us in future. And that in case it happens, they told each family, what to do to prepare for emergency. That is basically one of the core features of the national emergency response. Of course, we have the aspect that has to do with disaster management in PNG. But the emergency response functions in a slightly different way than the current arrangement we have. So if there are emergency situations that we warrant people, to remain indoor so that the law enforcement agency could tackle such an insecurity, at the moment in PNG, we do not have the means, to communicate with each citizen individually. So these are aspects that we need to reorganize in PNG to enable us have, better results in terms of law, enforcement, and, curb some of these insecurities that is gradually presenting a negative, picture of what PNG is like to other nations.
Welcome back. You're watching In Focus. In this session, we discuss the RPNGC's Family and Sexual Violence Unit. Now, Akem, many of the occurrences of criminal activities do not get reported, and if they were, they could not be followed through. What would you attribute such practices to?
Most of the criminal activities are not reported because they happen in the urban areas. We have reporters around. They can be able to report. But you think about Maramondi in Wabek, where it will be hard to report because there is no reporters in the rural location. So most of the cases happen in the rural areas are not reported because there is no media around or there is no people to report. That's one. Two, because of fear. If they report, they can attack them again. So they fear about their life, and some of the criminal activities happening in our country is not reported because they can take revenge on them. So they fear about their life and they are not reporting to the media. Another thing is like domestic violence and all this are not reported because they can feel ashamed when they report it. Community can know about them. So those are some things where stopping people to report some of the criminal activities happen in our country.
Most the victims of criminal activities are reluctant to come forward to police. What would you attribute that to?
Yeah, I mean, suppose monkey and bagara meria lo bus or lo place meriam semia. So it's very difficult for a woman to report any act of violence against her if she's confronted with a male police officer. So you mean look plandi will police meri. So I think if we increase the numbers of police women, I think that would really help to, at least in the formal justice sector, encourage women to report crimes against them. Similarly, if in general crime, it's difficult for somebody. 85% of Papua New Guineans live in villages in the bush, so reporting crime in a formal justice system is very difficult because they have to travel to a population area, to a court or to a police station to make that complaint. So, I mean, we have 18,000 village courts all around the country which are really accessible for most people. And village courts are somewhere which most people will defer to and report such crimes. And if it's a criminal case, that will be deferred to the national courts. If it's a civil case, the village courts can manage those. And I think the village courts are an absolute treasure that PNG has. Not too many people recognise it as such. It's a fabulous system which PNG should be very proud of, and should actually support and expand rather than building any new kinds of systems to address law and order. Strengthen the ones we've got, especially ones that are rooted in custom and law. That's our opinion.
Now, gender-based violence and domestic violence, as you mentioned, has been increasing quite dramatically in Papua New Guinea. It's evident through social media and mainstream media as well. This has prompted the establishment of the RPNGC's Family and Sexual Violence Unit. How effective do you feel they've been, and where can they be further improved?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just hearing anecdotally, so I'm just, referring to my colleagues how they are responding, and even in today's paper, I see, this family and sexual violence story where, the teams from the RPNGC are totally committed to this, and I think they are really overperforming, given the limited, resources they are given through the RPNGC. But I think, family sexual violence unit is really something that, again, the police should be very, very proud of, and again, should be strengthened.
Welcome back. You're watching In Focus. In this session, we look at the effectiveness of crime prevention and deterrence mechanisms in PNG and the practice of compensation.
Now, the crime prevention mechanisms in PNG, I must be honest with you, they are current. But it seems the issue we have with such mechanisms, have to do with the fact that they do not have adequate capacity, to tackle crime occurrences in every location of Papua New Guinea. For instance, one thing the public must realize is that the police is not omnipresent. That means the police can't be everywhere at every time. And there are different mechanisms that are put in place to help the police in terms of law enforcement. For instance, of course, when we visited Akem, we were told that they have a kind of village court system where they do mediation, peace mediation, have an agreement, and such that people pay compensation if they have committed one crime or the other, not that to them that are civil. But the truth is, they also put in place what they call mouse order, to forestall such occurrences. But once such arrangement fails, they then bring in, the police. Now, one thing the police too must realize is that there is the need for education. For instance, if about 4 to 5 vehicles of the RPNGC will just storm this area where we have EMTV, people will start panicking, running here and there. So in different nations of the world, there are adverts that are placed. Police is your friend. Telling the public that they are both partners in crime prevention and that the public is not at the mercy of the police. So these aspects, seems to be lacking. A kind of publicity on partnership between the public and the police. In other nations of the world, there is what we call police community, committee, where in areas where we do not have the presence of, RPNGC personnel in PNG, they will have community leaders that are directly interacting with the police so that crime occurrences in such areas, could be tackled effectively. And again, there are certain dynamics that the RPNGC personnel, has not tapped into. For instance, some of these young boys, that are into pickpocketing and stealing few things that are caught, at different points in PNG. There is the constructive aspect, of bringing in those children. Of course, they are juvenile offenders, agreed. But the police can enlist them, as informants, where whenever crime occurs, they have a mechanisms of notifying, the appropriate personnel. They are called informants in developed nations. And lastly, the aspect that I feel is also lacking when it comes to the mechanisms for crime prevention in PNG in other nations of the world, you see CCTV everywhere. Where when certain crime occurs, the police are notified at their situation room and they move to that location to arrest that offender. But at the moment, I'll be very honest, the police are actually giving their best. The custom, the immigration, they are doing, great things. But it seems that their capacity is inadequate at the moment to tackle crime occurrences in PNG. And lastly, if you have visited the PNG-Indonesia border, you will see that there is a need for the government to reorganize, the security setup at that border. Because at different fora that I've attended, everyone seems to, be conversant with what is happening in the PNG-Indonesia border, and they feel that if we can actually put in place adequate security, at that border, that a lot of crimes regarding illegal use of firearms, smuggling, and a whole lot of things in PNG, will actually be reduced to the barest minimum. So I would like to leave it at this point, but I feel what we can do to improve the situation is, to improve on our mode of recruitment for the different organizations represented in the law and justice sector, and also build their capacity to use modern equipment rather than relying solely, on the conventional approaches where once they call the police that crime is occurring at so place, they then move there. There are other things that can be used, or put in place by the government to help the police prevent crime occurrences in PNG better than they are doing at the moment.
Welcome back. You're watching In Focus. In this session, we look at how the common law competes with the Melanesian way. Now, Akem, in terms of law, does PNG have the balance right in terms of upholding the rule of common law with that of the Melanesian way? For example, the practice of compensation. Do you believe PNG has the balance right, or does it need to do more?
PNG really need to do more, because at the moment that what we have is compensation is becoming a practice in our country, where someone is involved in killing or murder, they pay compensation. This is we are promoting indirectly. We are promoting that kind of action or behavior to continue. If the base thing that we need to do is when this kind of people need to be arrested, and they must face the force law. If we continue this kind of practice of compensation, if someone is raping a girl and they pay a compensation, so they are not paying the penalty of the action, so they will continue to involve in this kind of behavior. So compensation, in my view, is not a good thing that PNG must encourage to do, because we are encouraging people to continue in murdering other people, raping, stealing, or anything that we do in our country.
I agree to a certain level, but I think compensation is something which is embedded in Papua New Guinea culture. Compensation is something which, across PNG, it's been used for centuries, and it's not something that we can change very readily. What's happened is the concept of compensation and bride price even, it's been distorted through rapid modernization of PNG society. And now compensation now means, as you said, Tom, you can buy your way out of a criminal case. In the case of rape, as you said, rape is a criminal case which should not be dealt with under the village court system. It should be under the national courts. Unfortunately, some village courts magistrates are, in the lack of any formal court system, sometimes they have to hear such cases because there's otherwise that might trigger further violence or retaliation. But by and large, village courts, as I mentioned, I think are something which really it's an institution which really should be celebrated in this country. It's fabulous. And just on the point that Dr. Igor was saying about the community policing, we have some excellent organic, homegrown models of community policing in PNG. For example, in Bougainville, post-conflict, the New Zealand government, New Zealand police have developed a very embedded form of community policing, which uses local grassroots people nominated by the Council of Chiefs or Council of Elders to be nominated their own community police. They're trained up to a certain level, and then they're given the rights of arrest like any other police officer. But they're not in barracks. They live and work inside their own communities. And they automatically have the trust and the respect of the communities that selected them. Whereas I think the national police officers sometimes, I'm sorry to say, rule out of fear and intimidation, which is something that PNG doesn't respond to. And that's another reason, I guess, why people are reluctant to report crimes, because they're afraid of what the police might do. So I think PNG's got some fabulous systems and models which we can build on, and appropriate to the environments which we find ourselves, like in Bougainville or in the Highlands or in NCD or in Ley, wherever we happen to be working.
Thank you for explaining to us that, of course, compensation is embedded in the PNG culture. During the time we were collecting data for the non-state actors' participation in building civil communities in PNG project, I think it was at Hagen that a religious leader told us that they discovered that the compensation mechanisms, seems to be breeding further criminal activities in PNG, and that where he resides, that all the leaders, they came together and entered into an agreement that anyone that commits crime in that neighborhood, that compensation is not an option. And that once you commit crime, that is, of a very serious nature, that they hand over the person, to the personnel of RPNGC. And that where they can't get one readily, they have their mechanisms for transferring such a person. To enable him or her face the full force of law regarding that infraction committed. And when we asked him that, yes, what has been the outcome? He told us that, for the first time in a number of years, that everyone in the neighborhood, they are actually compliant to what is actually right for people to live in a safe, community. So, of course, I agree with you, and I also agree with Akem, but the truth is, I feel we should look into this and see, if compensation, the use of compensation regarding infractions of serious nature, if it has worked, and if it has not worked, how do we, go into this aspect, amend it such that it will not start creating problem for people to buy their way out of criminal activities of a serious nature in PNG.
Welcome back. You're watching Infocus. In this session, we look at the new and emerging criminal activities in PNG. Now, this question is for the whole panel. We are currently witnessing a new emerging trend in criminal activities, particularly the sale, distribution, and consumption of hard drugs like cocaine and methamphetamine, or ICE. Are our government's institutions able to adequately respond to such illegal practices? Perhaps we'll start with Akem.
Smuggling of drugs, human trafficking, those are international crime where it is happening now. At the moment that we see in a daily newspaper about the drug, movement of drug, the drug is moved from one location to another. So PNG is becoming a transit area where they move drugs from Indonesia across to Australia, or from Australia to Indonesia. So PNG become a transit area where those drugs are moved. So we really need to find out in the future, research needs to be carried out so that we establish the evidence or find out how these drugs or human trafficking, all those international crimes are committed. So some of the things that we have in our country is we have a weak governance. So they cannot control, they cannot monitor those criminal activities is going on. Another thing is we have corruption in our place where public fund is not managed properly to deal with this kind of criminal activities is going on. Then we have improved technology at the moment that we have, not in the past that in our forefathers' time where they don't have the technology. Now they have the technology where they used to move those drugs and all this. They can have contact with some other people. PNG, they have contact with some of the people they are dealing with in Australia using social media, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and all this. So that's how this kind of activity is going on. So we really need to do a research on this to find out. So PNG is in a place with geographic location where it is a transit area where they move those things easily. So we have to have some more training on this. Or now our security can force like PNG DF, police, they can deal with this kind of drug trafficking or human trafficking. Then we need to have proactive measures in place. Like what we are doing now is when the drug and all this move into Mosby or Civic or Morobay, then government is trying to inform police and defense to take measures. But we don't have the proactive strategies in place to deal with this kind of problem, drug trafficking and all this. So we really need to have a proactive measures in place to deal with future any human trafficking or drug or anything transnational crime that we have in our country. And we really need to carry out not research but awareness, informing people living around the border. You see any this kind of people moving from this side to this side, you inform police or those security posts so that they can easily deal with this kind of people. Those are some measures that we really need to take to control the transnational crime in our country that is happening at the moment.
I mean, for the insights you have provided. Now, the first thing I would like us to note is that in most nations of the world, drug law enforcement, is not left to the police any longer. So a lot of nations, they've created organizations or agency. For instance, I know one, in a country abroad, the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency. So, of course, they operate like RPNGC in PNG, but is a separate, body with focus to prevent issues relating to drug and a whole lot of things. So the first step, to tackle the occurrences of sale and distribution of hard drugs in PNG, is for government to establish a separate entity, to see to it. And basically, of course, they interrelate with other agencies like customs and immigration, but they are in charge of, drug law enforcement. And beside it, when you look into the situation in PNG, of course, the police, they've given their best. If you've been very conversant with news, reported in the last couple of weeks, there are people that have been prosecuted, for drug-related offenses, cocaine, metamorphine, and ice. And there is another one, of course, that is in vogue that I saw or I read in the newspapers. So, but one thing we must realize is that when we talk about the prevention, of drug abuse and a whole lot of things, drug markets that are evolving or drug sales in different nations, We don't leave it to police solely. I've mentioned the creation of an independent agency, to tackle that. Also, at the different levels of schooling, there is the use of education. There are informal clubs that are put in place in primary, in secondary, and at university, that works with these independent agencies in terms of, orientating people, as to what illicit use of drugs do to people, the nature of, different types of drugs that are moved around and the effect on human beings and what it does to the image of the nation. So with that, intelligence is not only collected by, the police and the agency in charge of, illicit drug use in PNG. It's also, provided by people at different levels. For instance, at a particular nation abroad, in their national youth program, they have that club where we have university graduates working with them, to ensure that once they see any incident of anyone smoking marijuana in their neighborhood or using cocaine or using heroin or a host of other stimulants that are classified as illegal, by UN convention, all they need is to just pick their mobile phone and call the appropriate personnel and, they get that person arrested. And the basic thing is that some of the people that were prosecuted in PNG for drug-related offenses, do we have a means of rehabilitation for them? So that aspect, seems to be, an inadequate aspect of our current engagement. It's good they've been prosecuted. But how do we ensure when they conclude their jail terms, they don't return to the society and continue, with that illicit activity? So these are aspects that if the government deems it appropriate, to create a national drug law enforcement agency for PNG that they see to. The prosecution is there, the rehabilitation is there, so that they will have been trained in different entrepreneurial activities that will prevent them from taking to that life of crime once they leave the prison yard, or the detention centers. So these are aspects that I've seen, that has actually worked in other nations of the world that we must see to, integrate or put in place in PNG.
Another emerging trend is cybercrime or cyberbullying. Do you feel there is adequate awareness and education of the users of technology to not only protect themselves, but to also use the technology responsibly?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and it's something that I think PNG is becoming more and more accustomed to using, social media apps. Most people have access to phones these days, and cyberbullying is becoming an issue, especially around election time, local government elections and national elections. We have to be careful not to overreact as a country in terms of people having the right to be critical of some perhaps government policies or people who they feel might be acting outside the law. That should not be construed as bullying. It's something that I think every citizen has a right under the Constitution to be able to demonstrate their dissension as a PNG citizen. So on the one hand, yes, it is a problem, cyberbullying in some cases, but we shouldn't, what we say, throw the baby out with the bathwater by condemning all kind of forms of social media, critical social media, if it's done in the sense of fair play and in a genuine sense of critical analysis, perhaps of public figures or government officials, if that's appropriate. And just backing up slightly about the problem about narcotics coming into PNG, the past 25 years, it's definitely become more of a problem. That's something that the UN is very concerned about. We have the office of a UN Office on Drugs and Crime, which has an office here in PNG, who's very concerned about the flow of narcotics into the country. They work very closely with Interpol. Interpol has an office in PNG, our PNGC headquarters. We're hearing that, there's some motorcycle gangs, criminal gangs in Australia importing drugs via PNG. They have a presence here. We're hearing about selling marijuana, drugs for guns, especially in border areas. These are things which are anecdotal again, but we are hoping to sort of get a better handle on when we conduct our small arms survey. But the way we fight this is sharing intelligence from outside of PNG also. So the drugs have to come in somehow and they have to leave somehow. And the more intelligence that the government is given to be able to control this flow of Class A drugs and narcotics, the better the government will be able to combat that.
Regarding the occurrences of cyber crimes in PNG, of course, Tony mentioned cyberbullying. Of course, there is also the aspect, that has to do with child pornography. And most incidences of cyber crimes that, I've read in the newspapers that have gone to the national court, they have to do with cyber harassment or defamation of character. But the truth is, most of those cases, were not prosecuted successfully due to want of evidence. So now that calls to question the capacity of the cybercrime unit of the RPNGC personnel in Papua New Guinea. And of course, I've visited that unit. They are doing well at the moment, but the truth is, what I discovered is needed is that we must, give them further training. Because the way you investigate crimes in the physical spaces is actually different from investigation of criminal occurrences in the cyberspace. Now the cyberspace or the cyberspace operates differently from the physical spaces. Now, Dr. Ige. Dr. Ige can use another name to register an account on Facebook or, on Gmail or Yahoo or any of, the relevant social medias, TikTok. And I will put Akem's picture there, on that name, and everyone will feel, Akem is the one operating that account. Meanwhile, Akem does not even know that such an account exists. And I'll be using that, to bully people, to defame their character. And, if the police, will not do deeper investigation or have the means to check the IP address of that user, now they will arrest Akem in the physical space for a crime he has not committed. That is, one of the technicalities regarding cybercrime in any nation of the world. There was a case that occurred abroad. A particular lady, they uploaded a sex video on the internet, and she was a minor, and a lot of things happened. And on a particular day, she was with her father and mother. They were returning from their lawyer. And someone called her father that if you log on to Tugo is a social, media site, that your daughter is currently online and active. And the man said, for heaven's sake, my daughter is with me in the vehicle. So she can't be with me in the vehicle, and now she's not logging onto any ancillary device or mobile phone, and you'll be telling me she is currently active on Tugo. So that tells you the intricate nature of investigating crime occurrences in the cyberspace. So what basically I feel the PNG as a nation needs to do is, to collaborate with agencies abroad. There is this National White Collar Crime Center in the United States, and FBI, they have capacity in that aspect. And in Australia too, I'm aware they have capacity when it comes to investigating occurrences of crimes in the cyberspace. So these are transnational arrangements that the government of PNG can make for the cybercrime unit of the RPNGC, to become more effective, in preventing crime occurrences in the cyberspace. Of course, I will leave it at that point, but the truth is, in terms of crime prevention in the cyberspace, we still have a long way to go. And we have a lot to do to ensure we have the desired results.
Mr. Tony Cameron, Dr. Olugbenga Ige, and Akem Tom, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Drew.
Well, viewers, that's all the time we have for this special one-hour edition of Infocus. Do join us again next week, Monday, for another episode of Infocus. Till then, bye for now.
This program was proudly brought to you by Telecom Limited and Daytech.